All right, fellow fact checkers. Now, before we start the show, I want to remind you to head over and check out our great sponsor, Fox and Son Coffee. They've got an amazing deal with all kinds of blends going on. So head over there and check it out. You can get the Mexican honey prep, the Brazilian honey prep, the Guatemalan, the Ethiopian. They'll be adding new roasts regularly. So be sure to check in and see what new flavors Steve has got over at Fox and Sons Coffee. They've also got all of your usual favorites, the Den Blend Dark, the Den Blend Light, and the one that we personally like around the house since we can't seem to agree on which of the light or the dark is better for both me and the wife, the Den Blend 2 Electric Boogaloo, which is the medium roast. So be sure to use the checkout code FCT for Fact Check This at checkout, and that'll get you an 18% discount on any order of $25 or more. Also, any order of $37.99 or more get you free shipping. Load up on all the greatest coffee on the market, and you can thank me later. Well, let's start the show.
This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast.
All right, Fact Check This podcast. And today we are going to look at Time Magazine's 2024 Person of the Year, Donald Trump. Specifically, we're going to look at the article that was written about this. This is one of those that I thought it was well written. There were some things I disagree with, some things that are, leftist talking point type things. But overall, it was a good article. Honestly, I mean, that's like I said, it had some things that I don't necessarily agree with. It had some things that were, kind of the propaganda talking point type stuff. But overall, it was very well written. It's very fair to Trump. It does a good job of kind of capturing the entire moment that was 2024 and the election cycle and everything that sort of happened. So I thought it was one of those that most people are not going to take the time to sit down and read a Time Magazine Person of the Year write-up. But I thought it was worth being discussed and reading it for show. And then even if you don't want to personally read it, you can listen to me read it. So I don't know that I'll have some commentary here and there, but not a whole lot. Is like I said, it was well done. I will talk about some of it as I go, but for the most part, I'm just going to read it because I thought it was, again, well written. So anyway, we'll jump right into it because it is a long read, and I don't want to take too much more of your time than what I normally do. And for those who watch the videos, the cover shot for Time's Person of the Year, this should be one of those iconic photos, one of those iconic images from 2024. Like this is like the bookend to all of the iconic moments of this past year and Trump's presidential run. Donald Trump, 2024 Time Person of the Year. Mar-a-Lago was quiet 3 days before Thanksgiving. Donald Trump's Moorish palace seemed to be all but deserted late that morning. The seaside estate's cavernous living room traversed intermittently by junior staffers or silent aides. Totems to Trump were displayed everywhere. Framed magazines with him on the cover hung by the front door. On a table near the fireplace sat a cast bronze eagle awarded to him by singer Lee Greenwood. In the men's lavatory, a picture of him with Arnold Palmer hung near the urinals. Adorning a wall in the library bar, a painting titled The Visionary depicted Trump in a tennis sweater, trim and youthful. The empty rooms felt less like a millionaire members club than a museum. By mid-afternoon, the president-elect's imminent arrival had stirred signs of life. Discreetly placed speakers offered up selections from Trump's personally curated 2,000-song playlist. A handful of transition honchos and soon-to-be administration officials arrived perching on overstuffed sofas and huddling in corners. Incoming Chief of Staff Susie Wiles conferred with Trump's designated National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance strode in with a retinue of staffers. An aide posted up near a window overlooked the patio, setting down Trump's personal cell phone, which lit up occasionally with calls and texts from favored media personalities and cabinet picks. You could sense Trump before you could see him, the small group of senior aides rising to their feet in anticipation. The world's most powerful man entered with an air of unhurried bonhomie. Dressed in his trademark navy suit and red tie, Trump, 78, appeared a little older than he had some 7 months earlier when he last met with Time, more subdued, less verbose, the same discursive speech patterns, but with the volume turned down. Sitting under bright lights for a 30-minute photo session ahead of a 65-minute interview, he's asked to explain the bruising on his right hand. It's from shaking hands with thousands of people, he says. Trump's political rebirth is unparalleled in American history. His first term ended in disgrace, with his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results culminating in the attack on the U.S. Capitol. Leftist media is never going to let this ridiculous J6 narrative die. So we all get pissed off about it, but at the end of the day, it's pointless. And Trump has said one of his, I fully hope and expect Monday or Tuesday that we are going to get pardons for all of the J6 folks who have been held in prison for no fucking reason for the last 3 or 4 years. So hopefully all of that gets sorted out. But yeah, I mean, even if he does, the left is never going to let this ridiculous narrative go. And there are some other ridiculous narratives that we're going to hit throughout the rest of the article that are also they're never going to let go. And it's just, you almost have to take it with a grain of salt. It's, yeah. He was shunned by most party officials when he announced his candidacy in late 2022 amid multiple criminal investigations. Little more than a year later, Trump cleared the Republican field, clinching one of the fastest contested presidential primaries in history. He spent 6 weeks during the general election in a New York City courtroom, the first former president to be convicted of a crime, a fact that did little to dampen his support. An assassin's bullet missed his skull by less than an inch at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania in July. Over the next 4 months, he beat not one but 2 Democratic opponents, swept all 7 swing states, and became the first Republican to win the popular vote in 20 years. He has realigned American politics, remaking the GOP and leaving Democrats reckoning with what went awry. Trump has a ready explanation for his improbable resurrection. He even has a name for its climactic final act. I called it 72 Days of Fury, he says as the interview gets underway. We hit the nerve of the country. The country was angry. It wasn't just the MAGA faithful. Trump harnessed deep national discontent about the economy, immigration, and cultural issues. His grievances resonated with suburban moms and retirees, Latino and Black men, young voters, and tech edgelords. While Democrats estimated that most of the country wanted a president who would uphold the norms of liberal democracy, Trump saw a nation ready to smash them, tapping into a growing sense that the system was rigged. If America was craving change, it is about to see how much Trump can deliver. He ran on a strongman vision, proposing to deport migrants by the millions, dismantle parts of the federal government, seek revenge against his political adversaries. I don't think he ever has this. Seek revenge against political adversaries is another one of those leftist talking points that I don't think Trump has ever actually said he's trying to seek revenge against his political adversaries. But whatever. God, I hope he does it. I hope he's everything that they say he's going to be, and then some. I want him to be so much worse than what they say. And dismantle institutions that millions of people see as censorious and corrupt. He understands the cultural zeitgeist, says his 2016 campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, who remains a close advisor. Donald Trump is a complicated person with simple ideas, and way too many politicians are the exact opposite. That is so perfect. Trump also promises to attack the sources abroad that he blames for the country's malaise: economic interdependence, transnational criminals, traditional allies he sees as free riders on America's long-running global beneficence. He believes he has tools to fight back: punitive tariffs, bare-knuckle negotiations, and threats to withdraw U.S. military, humanitarian, and economic support. Willing to upend the nation's post-war rule as a bulwark against authoritarianism, he promises to usher in a foreign policy rooted in American first transactionalism. Lord, bring the day. Much still stands in his way. The Republicans have narrow majorities in the House and Senate. A conservative Supreme Court may not bless all his boundary-pushing policies. Enduring institutional resistance inside the federal bureaucracy could thwart his designs. The public also remains a powerful check on any president. Trump has proved twice now that he can surf to power on anti-incumbent sentiment, a cult of personality, and divisive rhetoric, including racist and xenophobic attacks. Again, this is God, where has he said anything racist or xenophobic? They'll never point to that, but like it's these same like dumb fuck talking points. Like it is so hardwired into these leftist journalists' writing that they can't not say it, even though it's completely objectively untrue. They can't not say it. He is yet to prove that he can enact the radical vision he campaigned on. He hasn't taken office yet. So those closest to the president-elect say that he will surprise people by fulfilling his promises. Most politicians don't, says Wiles, and he will. Whether Trump can actually fix the root causes of Americans' anger is another question. He will now have to contend with the same forces he rode to the White House: a globalized economy, mass migration, the rise of China, that have bedeviled predecessors from both parties and ousted incumbents around the world. He will also see just how far the nation is willing to let him go. If he succeeds, he could reshape the country. Along the way, he risks tearing down the constitutional norms and institutions that have seen America's great experiment in democracy through 2.5 centuries. To be very clear, America was not intended to be a great experiment on democracy. It was meant to be a republic. This whole protect democracy thing is a complete and total farce. It is completely unconstitutional. In fact, the risk of tearing down constitutional norms and institutions, all of those norms and institutions are completely and totally unconstitutional, but because they have become institutionalized norms, everybody thinks that there's something that belongs, but they are not. They should be torn down all the way to the fucking studs, burned to the ground, salt the earth, and never come back to any of this bullshit ever a fucking again. That's what ought to be done. Will we get even close to that? God, I hope so. I keep saying, I hope he's everything they say he will be and worse. This great experiment in democracy was never intended to be an experiment in democracy at all. It was intended to be a republic. In fact, the founders went to great lengths to try to protect against it becoming a democracy. Trump was in the private cabin of his plane flying to an April 2nd campaign rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, when he picked up a document Wiles had placed atop a stack of papers. The heading was not subtle: How a National Abortion Ban Will Cost Trump the Election. Trump raised his eyebrows. Kind of a nasty title, huh? He said. The episode was a turning point for an issue central to the race: whether Trump could find a position on abortion that would limit his electoral losses with women after playing a pivotal role in the fall of Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade fell during the Biden administration just because Trump put the, and I've talked about this at length, but just because Trump put the Supreme Court justices in, or nominated Supreme Court justices who are sitting on the bench when Roe versus Wade came back around, this is actually the left's own fucking fault. Roe versus Wade got overturned because they couldn't leave well enough alone, and they brought completely justifiable abortion restriction bills to the Supreme Court to have them rule that you could have an abortion up to the day of consent, or up to the day of birth, basically. Like, they fought over a 15-week abortion bill in Mississippi. And that was what doomed them. A bill that was literally based on the average from Europe. The European averages for abortion cutoffs is what the Mississippi bill was based on. And that wasn't good enough. They wanted it to be third trimester all the way up, like everything. No restrictions ever whatsoever. The left cost themselves Roe versus Wade, and they deserve every fucking bit of it. And also, they didn't lose the right to abortion. It got moved to a states' rights issue, and you saw that play out in a number of states in this election. But again, this is one of those like dipshit, like mongoloid brain talking points that the left can't fucking let go of, because they are actually stupid and they don't actually understand what has happened to get us to this point with a lot of this stuff, which is why the Trump presidency is going to be so interesting, and to see how the midterm elections and the 2028 elections go, because the left hasn't actually fucking learned anything. And I don't know if they will actually learn anything. But I digress. We're reading the article. That in turn was part of Trump's larger challenge: how to offer change to everyone who wanted it, including voters put off by his positions or behavior. There are not enough MAGA people to actually win an election, a Trump campaign official tells Times. So who do you go get? How do you broaden that? Before he considered the memo, Trump had been on the verge of supporting a 16-week federal abortion ban. Conway had showed him polling that indicated barring the procedure after 16 weeks of pregnancy was more popular than doing so after 24. But Trump's speechwriter and policy advisor, Vince Haley, had raised an objection on a late March conference call, according to 3 people present. Does he know that the 16-week ban will be stricter than existing law in a lot of these states? There was a silence. Probably not, said Trump's political director, James Blair, who set to assembling a slide deck that argued such a ban would hurt Trump in key states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, all of which offered women the opportunity to obtain the procedure until at least 20 weeks of pregnancy. After flipping through Blair's presentation on the plane, Trump perked his head up. So we leave it to the states, right? Advisors agreed. Great, Trump said. We'll do a video. Within a few minutes, he was dictating his remarks to Haley. A few days later, Trump released the clip on his social media platform. For the rest of the race, a politician who had once asserted that there has to be some form of punishment for women who undergo abortions stuck to his stance of treating it as a states' rights issue, which, at its core, is exactly how the Supreme Court treated it. They didn't ban abortion. They didn't do, they overturned the Roe versus Wade, making it a federal thing, and returned it to the rights of the states, which is how everything is supposed to be handled anyway, which is why I said, talking about those norms and institutions, they all need to be gutted because they are not constitutional. A ban like this, or a ruling like this, Roe versus Wade, is and was always unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court determined that and set it back to a states' rights issue. The same month, Trump made another fateful decision: to end his crusade against vote by mail and early voting. For more than a year, senior advisors urged him to embrace a practice Trump had baselessly maligned as rife with fraud since the 2020 election. Several of his top lieutenants, including Wiles and Blair, were Florida operatives trained in the science of banking early votes. Wiles wrote Trump a memo showing the data on how spurning mail ballots cost Republicans a series of razor-thin races in 2022. It will be self-defeating to oppose the practice, argued Wiles and Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura, whom he handpicked as co-chair of the RNC. Trump listened, but it took a visit from Rob Gleason, a former chair of the Pennsylvania Republican Party, to frame the matter in terms that made him agree. Sir, your people are so excited to vote for you that they want to as soon as they can, Gleason told him during an April meeting at Mar-a-Lago, according to 2 Trump officials familiar with the conversation. They don't want to wait, but you got to tell them it's okay. You got to give them permission. From then on, Trump promoted absentee and early voting and directed the RNC to launch a mobilization drive targeting mail voters. By the summer, Trump had the confidence of a man holding history in his hands. In late June, Joe Biden's weak debate performance spurred an open revolt among panicking Democrats. On July 13th, Trump survived the assassination attempt, prompting an outpouring of support and sympathy. To many Americans, his defiance in the aftermath of the shooting, rising bloodied fists in the air, chanting "fight," made him an inspirational figure for the first time. A lot of people changed with that moment, Trump tells Time, sipping Diet Coke from a glass at Mar-a-Lago. For those who are watching the video, the picture of Trump, the different pictures of Trump throughout this have been really, really good. Trump's strengthening position prompted Biden to drop out of the race and endorse Vice President Kamala Harris. Within a matter of days, Harris consolidated support, raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and galvanized a moribund Democratic base. In the wake of a successful Democratic National Convention, Trump's inner circle experienced a creeping sense that he could lose. It was the moment of maximal worry, says Vance. There was this sense of, is the honeymoon with Kamala Harris going to last all the way until the election? I can't believe that anybody had serious concerns about that. The DNC was, well, I mean, we watched like every night of it on varying streams. Like, the DNC was a joke. It was an absolute joke. But I guess, like, you know, if you're paying attention to polling and you're paying attention to the media and what they were saying about it, then yeah, maybe you think, oh gosh, this might be serious. But like, I don't know, watching it, I never really took Kamala Harris seriously as a challenger. But I view her a lot differently, as I've covered a lot over the last year or so. Trump is a devotee of the Don Draper maxim. If you don't like what's being said, change the conversation. And so his team did. For the record, Mad Men is one of my favorite television series of all time. I watch it. I watch replays of it regularly. I have the whole like box set on a counter or on a shelf back there, and I watch it fairly frequently. Another one that I really love is Las Vegas, and I've actually started rewatching Las Vegas from season 1 through, but that's neither here nor there. So Trump is a devotee of Don Draper maxim. If you don't like what's being said, change the conversation. And so his team did. Trump's son, Don Jr., had long cultivated a rapport with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose independent campaign for the presidency in 2024 had garnered surprising levels of support, especially among disillusioned young men. Don Jr. worried Kennedy's candidacy risked siphoning key votes, and he began clandestine negotiations as the conversations progressed. Trump Jr. and Wiles began coordinating with Kennedy's campaign manager, his daughter-in-law, Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, about removing him from the ballot in swing states and endorsing Trump. As Vance tells it, the pitch was simple. You're not going to win. You're not going to have any effect on this race other than taking votes away from Donald Trump. So why don't you actually join the team, set differences to the side, and focus on the big things that we care about? Once Kennedy bought into the plan, Wiles advised waiting to announce it until after the Democratic convention, believing it would stall Harris's momentum. To Wiles, the endorsement was one of the campaign's key moments. It neutralized the threat that Kennedy would peel off votes from Trump. But more importantly, he allowed us to broaden the base of the party, she says. He was a key way to do that. And this is some statistics. Trump's changing coalition, the percentage point margin of victory by Trump or by the Democrat in 2016, 2020, and then in 2024. So, and this is interesting to look at some of these changes. Latino men went from voting plus 31 for the Democrat in 16 to plus 23 for the Democrat in 2020 to plus 10 for Trump in 2024. Again, this is like, and you see with these, Trump gained huge ground with Latino men, with voters of color, with Latina women, with voters of color, both with and without college degrees. Big improvement with black men, big improvement with the 18 to 29-year-olds. Even improvement with black women and urban voters. Like, it's interesting to see some of these numbers, and the fact that white men and white women with college degrees Trump lost ground with both of those. And that's like consistently over all three, 16, 20, and 24, Trump lost ground with them. If that's ever an indication like sending your kids to college might be a bad idea, it's liberalizing them and radicalizing them against the better interests of the country. Some of these types of things might be of importance. But like even though Democrats still won the majority of the voters for, voters of color with no degree, Latino women, voters of color with college degrees, black men, the 18 to 29 demographic, even though they still won those, they are winning them by a considerably lower percentage, which is what contributes to Trump being the first Republican to win the popular vote in over 20 years. Other new voters were devotees of Elon Musk, who endorsed Trump after the attack in Butler. Musk ended up pouring more than $250 million into supporting him, turning X into a de facto campaign organ and serving as a key validator with the tech execs and corporate chieftains who had shied away from Trump for much of his time in the political arena. Now Musk will be among the array of billionaires with direct access to the Oval Office, creating a web of competing conflicts of interest. I don't really see how Musk is creating a web of competing conflicts of interest, especially since a lot of what Trump has specifically talked about that would directly impact Elon Musk is doing away with EV vouchers and the push for EV. And Musk is the owner of Tesla. So like the biggest conflict of interest would actually go not in the favor of the guy who the left is suddenly screeching is like some sort of oligarch who's actually running the country. President Musk. To boost the contrast, the campaign maneuvered to portray Harris as too left-wing. It called attention to a questionnaire Harris filled out for the ACLU in 2019 during her last run for president, in which she supported taxpayer-funded sex change operations for undocumented migrants held in detention. Trump's advisor, Taylor Budowich, and an ad maker, Pat McCarthy, drummed up a line that would define his most influential campaign advertisement. Kamala Harris is for they, them. President Trump is for you. The Trump campaign spent nearly $20 million to air the ad and some 55,000 times in the first half of October, making it a key part of his closing message. Strategists from both parties are divided over whether the Trump's team blueprint made the difference in a close race, or if Harris's headwinds from pandemic-induced inflation to broad disquiet over Biden's age were just too much to overcome in a truncated campaign against the world's most famous person. We were up against a caricature of being dangerously liberal, Harris's campaign chief, Jen O'Malley Dillon, said at a Harvard Institute of Politics conference on December 6th. The vice president's unwillingness to distance herself from her unpopular boss may have made as much of a difference as anything Trump did right. It was a big looming negative hanging over us the whole time, said Harris Deputy Campaign Manager Quentin Fawkes. On election night, Trump campaign staff set up a war room in Trump's office at Mar-a-Lago, poring over incoming returns as the candidate schmoozed in the club's ballroom with Musk and UFC chief Dana White. After North Carolina and Georgia shifted into his column, Trump peeked in. Anything concerning you, he asked. Nope, an aide replied. Feel good. Good, Trump said. When he returned to the ballroom, the jubilant crowd was dancing to YMCA by the Village People. A Trump rally staple that has become a cultural touchpoint, with everyone from professional athletes to TikTok aficionados mimicking his signature moves. Trump stood for a moment, taking it all in before turning to an aide and asking when they should head to the nearby convention center, where he would give his victory speech. The election gave Trump political capital to address the sources of American discontent at home and abroad. The question now is how he intends to spend it. By his own account, Trump will push the limits of presidential power and the law. One of the first official acts of his presidency, Trump tells Time, will be to pardon most of the rioters accused or convicted of storming the Capitol to block the certification of Biden's victory. It's going to start in the first hour, he says, maybe the first 9 minutes. Trump also plans early actions to reverse many of Biden's executive orders and expand drilling of oil on federal land. Trump's most aggressive moves will be on immigration enforcement. He vows to tighten the U.S. border with Mexico through a slew of executive orders, and aides say he would end the U.S. catch and release program and resume construction of a border wall. At the same time, he says he will order U.S. law enforcement agencies and potentially the military to embark on a massive deportation operation designed to remove more than 11 million undocumented migrants from the country. While the Posse Comitatus Act forbids the deployment of military against civilians, Trump says he is willing to enlist the military to round up and deport migrants. It doesn't stop the military if it's an invasion of our country, he says. Pressed on how he would respond if the military refuses to carry out those orders, Trump says, "I'll only do what the law allows, but I will go up to the maximum level of what the law allows." Trump tells Time he doesn't plan to restore the policy of separating children from their families to deter border crossing, but he doesn't rule it out either. "I don't believe we'll have to, because we'll send the whole family back," he says. "I would much rather deport them together." Trump's incoming border czar, Tom Homan, says there's no deliberate policy being worked on to separate families, but he also leaves open the possibility of children being ripped from their parents. "You can't say zero. It's not going to happen," Homan says. For a mass deportation operation of this scale, Trump's advisors are planning to build more detention centers to hold migrants until they can be deported to their home countries, a process that can take weeks, months, or even years to negotiate with receiving governments. It's not clear if all will be willing to take the migrants back. "We just don't arrest an alien and remove them on the same day," says Homan. "We're going to need beds." Trump says he will use access to the U.S. market as leverage to force foreign governments to cooperate. "I'll get them into every country," Trump says, "or we won't do business with those countries." The operation could come at a steep cost. The nonprofit American Immigration Council estimates the tally for Trump's mass deportation plans could be upwards of $300 billion. Oh gosh, that's like maybe a quarter of what we've sent to Ukraine for funding their war. How could we ever do that? Trump is likely to seek funding from Congress, according to aides. "It's going to be expensive," Homan says. American taxpayers could bear the brunt in other ways. Economists say deporting many of the low-wage workers who bolster multiple industries could lead to higher prices. If you eliminate the jobs of the people who are working on building houses, those who are doing the accounting and the supervising and the personnel and running the company, those kinds of jobs disappear also, says Douglas Rivlin of America's Voice, a progressive group that supports immigration reform. "It's a self-inflicted disaster." Democrats are always looking for their newest slave labor, however they can get it. That's before factoring in social and psychological costs to watching friends and neighbors rounded up and removed from their communities. "When you've seen the nightly news and there's a raid at Joe's Pizza," adds Hiroshi Motomura, an immigration scholar at UCLA, "it becomes very real." Just how radical Trump can be depends in part on the buy-in of the Justice Department, which is set to be led by former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, one of the defense attorneys on his first impeachment. Trump has vowed to seek retribution against his political enemies. Again, they keep saying this, but he hasn't. Saying the likes of Biden, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, Special Counsel Jack Smith, and others would face investigation and potential prosecution. Trump was coy in his interview with Time about whether his DOJ will target his domestic political adversaries, saying only that the decisions will be left to Bondi if she's confirmed. "That's up to her," he says. Either way, his victory spells the end of federal prosecutions that charged him with crimes ranging from election subversion to willfully retaining classified documents. Trump denied the allegations. Trump denied it because the FBI was literally at Mar-a-Lago the week before they raided him, checking on where he had everything and making sure that he had it secured and stored properly per all of their rules for stuff that former presidents are allowed to keep with them. They have to be stored in a proper way. They had just redone the storage of it, and the FBI had made sure that it was all stored properly before they decided to raid him and say that he was illegally retaining classified documents. The election subversion stuff. Just wow. To dismantle the federal bureaucracy, Trump has enlisted Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to head a commission dubbed DOGE, aimed at slashing the size of government. Musk and Ramaswamy have touted massive layoffs to the federal workforce, especially civil servants, and cuts to regulations on everything from the water we drink to the air we breathe. They promised to finish the job in time for the 250th anniversary of American independence, July 4th, 2026. Experts in government administration say the commission risks degrading the state's ability to function. It's not supposed to function, so cool. It's going to be harmful to the government's capacity to carry out the missions that Congress has assigned by statute. There is no statute. It's that Congress has assigned by decree, and unconstitutional decree at that. Like administering Social Security and Medicare, says Peter Shane, a New York University law professor. Oh, so sad. If the Musk-Ramaswamy Commission eliminates large numbers of civil servants, the government will likely have to rely on private companies instead. There's no guarantee, says Shane, that the contractor is going to be either cheaper or more competent. If you've ever had to deal with any government employees for anything ever, being more competent is not a high bar to get over. On the campaign trail, Trump said he would not order the DOJ to enforce the Comstock Act, a 19th century law that prohibits the mailing of abortion pills. When he spoke with Time before Thanksgiving, Trump's position on women's reproductive rights changed in the span of a few sentences. First, he left open the possibility that the FDA could reverse approvals for medication abortion and said it was highly unlikely, before declaring, "We're going to take a look at all of that." Asked to clarify whether he was committed to preventing the FDA from stripping access to abortion pills, Trump replied, "It's always been my commitment." While Trump's GOP will have majorities in the House and Senate, he has telegraphed a few major legislative pushes beyond extending his first-term tax cuts and funding an immigration crackdown. Trump says he supports preserving the filibuster, which allows a minority in the Senate to block legislation. If that prevents the passage of bills through Congress, he says he will use executive action. If I have even a little bit of trouble, he says, I go to an executive order because I can get it done. It was a glimpse of how Trump's expansive view of executive power will shape his second term. When he meets with inevitable obstacles, the idea of an imperial presidency is not new, but he's taking it further than anyone, says presidential historian Julian Zelizer of Princeton University. He doesn't care about the kind of restraints that still guided even Richard Nixon. None of that matters to him. So the potential is for an extraordinarily aggressive use of presidential power. Lord, bring the day. For all the focus on Trump's domestic agenda, much of the activity when Time visited Mar-a-Lago was on foreign affairs. Waltz, the incoming National Secretary Advisor, ducked in and out of meetings, speaking with Vance and Steve Witkoff, the incoming Special Envoy to the Middle East. A source present in the national security meetings says the goal was to ensure that America's adversaries and allies were not tempted to take advantage of the handoff between administrations. Many of Trump's answers to the nation's problems, including his immigration and trade policy, relies on successful diplomacy. America First may be both a campaign slogan and a governing North Star, but ending forever wars and boosting U.S. economic advantage requires working with others. Trump's plans threaten to upend relationships with allies and traditional trading partners by imposing a blanket tariff on imports. Already, he has floated 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, a move that most economists predict will cause prices to rise. And he plans to increase tariffs on Chinese imports, aiming to coerce manufacturers to make their products in the U.S. On the campaign trail, Trump liked to brag about brokering a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine in 24 hours. In person, he acknowledged this is trickier than he let on. The Middle East is an easier problem to handle than what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, he says. The numbers of dead young soldiers laying on fields all over the place are staggering. It's crazy what's taking place. Trump criticized Kiev for launching U.S.-made missiles into Russian territory last month. I disagree very vehemently with sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. Why are we doing that? He says. We're just escalating this war and making it worse. When pressed on whether or not he would abandon Ukraine, Trump says he would use U.S. support for Ukraine as leverage against Russia in negotiating an end to the war. I want to reach an agreement, he says. The only way you're going to reach an agreement is not to abandon. Excuse me. In phone calls during the campaign, Trump told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to wind down the war in Gaza by the time of his inauguration, a timeline that now looks highly unlikely. In Israel and the U.S., many suspect Netanyahu is prolonging the fighting to prevent snap elections that could result in his ouster. He knows I want it to end, Trump tells Time. When asked whether he trusts Netanyahu going into a second term, Trump takes a second before answering, I don't trust anybody. Trump also wants to expand the Abraham Accords he brokered between Israel and several Arab states to include Saudi Arabia. But he's less specific on a resolution between Israel and the Palestinians. In his first term, he put forth the most comprehensive plan for a two-state solution since Bill Clinton, and prevented Netanyahu from extending Israeli sovereignty over roughly 30% of the West Bank. But on November 12th, he nominated as incoming U.S. ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, a zealous supporter of the settlement movement who advocates for Israel's annexing the West Bank. The sudden collapse of Assad's rule in Syria on December 8th adds another layer of complexity to the Middle East. It brings to power a rebel group once affiliated with al-Qaeda, but also marks yet another setback for an Iran regime already weakened in Lebanon and Gaza. Some analysts fear the losses may make Iran more likely to push for a nuclear weapon. Since Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2018, Tehran has edged ever closer to acquiring a nuclear weapon. As of April, the International Atomic Energy Agency estimated that Tehran has enough weapons-grade uranium to build a bomb in a matter of weeks. Iran and its proxies have waged a multi-front war against Israel and have targeted U.S. assets in the region. During the presidential campaign, the Iranians plotted to assassinate Trump, according to federal charges brought in November by the Department of Justice. I don't know if anybody actually believes that, but that's what they say. While the president-elect prides himself on not entering into any new wars in his first term, he leaves open the possibility that one may be necessary in a second. Asked about the chances of war with Iran, Trump pauses and replies, anything can happen. By the time the dinner hour is approaching, the crowd has swelled in the ornate reception area at Mar-a-Lago, transforming into a buzzing King's Court. Job seekers camp out on sofas waiting to buttonhole Howard Lutnick, the Wall Street executive who co-chairs his transition. Lutnick, who is also Trump's chosen commerce secretary, has been tasked by Trump with vetting cabinet appointees for the trait Trump values most, loyalty. And we've got Trump's inner orbit that they're going to list here. James Blair, Deputy Chief of Staff. The campaign's political director will add Hill outreach to his duties in the White House. Pam Bondi, Attorney General, the loyalist, has been picked by Trump to lead the Department of Justice that may probe his adversaries. Taylor Budowich, Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications and Personnel. The longtime aide is focused on media strategy and staffing. Tom Homan, border czar, formerly director of ICE. Homan has been tasked with tightening the U.S.-Mexico border and overseeing mass deportations. Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary. The fellow New York billionaire and close friend, Lutnick is vetting potential staff picks for loyalty. Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. The far-right immigration advisor will have a broader portfolio in Trump's second term. Elon Musk, co-head of Doge, the world's richest man, will head a commission tapped to find ways to slash the federal government. Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. Once a primary rival, Rubio will soon manage the administration's foreign policy. J.D. Vance, Vice President Trump's second-in-command, represents the next generation of MAGA. Russ Vought, OMB Director, returning to his old role. Vought is expected to take a hammer to the administrative state. Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor. The former Florida congressman and Green Beret is now a trusted confidant. Susie Wiles, Chief of Staff. After co-running Trump's successful 2024 campaign, she will manage his White House operation. Trump has selected unconventional nominees who have demonstrated fealty to him and his agenda. Former Fox News host Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary, Tulsi Gabbard to become the Director of National Intelligence, and Kash Patel as his FBI Director. He rewarded Kennedy by nominating him to lead the Department of Health and Human Services and chose a pro-union labor secretary in a nod to working-class voters, while also installing billionaires in top positions to appease the donors who like Trump's tax cuts and deregulation. The cabinet taking shape reflects the fragmented coalition that powered him to victory, with Trump diehards mingling with mainstream choices like Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State and financier Scott Bessent for Treasury Department. As Trump gears up for his war on Washington, Washington's institutions are carefully pushing back. Republican senators forced Trump to abandon his first choice to run the Justice Department, the far-right former Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida, recoiling at his bombastic style and allegations that he had sex with a 17-year-old girl. Gaetz denies this. When it became clear the votes weren't there, Trump told Gaetz, "Matt, I don't think this is worth the fight." He tells Time. In a matter of hours, he announced Bondi, another loyalist, as a replacement. Senators have expressed alarm at Hegseth's lack of experience and allegations of sexual assault and alcohol abuse, which he denies. For the record, Pete Hegseth had the FBI report that came back on Pete Hegseth before his confirmation hearing was unremarkable, is what the FBI report said. Like there was nothing there for sexual assault, for alcohol abuse, for really anything. Like just he is pretty much exactly as advertised. And also, if the confirmation hearings taught us nothing else, it was that the Democrats are full on going to make a complete and total shit show and clown show of these confirmation hearings. Like the way that they tried to grill Hegseth and the way that he handled them, especially Elizabeth Warren, like the Democrats aren't ready for this, and it became very, very apparent that they're not ready for this. So it's going to be. I'm looking forward to the rest of the confirmation hearings. We'll put it that way. Some also worried about putting Gabbard at the helm of the U.S. intelligence community, given her prior positions in support of Russia and Assad's Syria. This idea that Tulsi Gabbard is some like Russian agent is maybe one of the most insane, bullshitty, left-wing things that they've ever come up with. This all stems from a hatred of Tulsi Gabbard that goes back to her just absolutely demolishing Kamala Harris's presidential campaign in 2020. Not even in 2020. I mean, she didn't even make it all the way out of 2019. She dropped out in like December of 2019. So Tulsi Gabbard completely destroying Kamala Harris's presidential run, and also going after Hillary Clinton at every fucking turn. And rightly so. She didn't say anything wrong about Hillary Clinton. It's a wonder that she's still alive after the way she went after her. So like this whole Russia and Assad thing is about Gabbard is insane. Trump says he will honor the Senate's role in confirming or rejecting his appointments, but does not rule out using recess appointments or installing acting agency heads to circumvent Senate approval. I really don't care how they get them approved, he tells Time, as long as they get them approved. Are recess appointments off the table? No, says a senior Trump advisor. He's not going to accept being dicked around. Trump says he will not ask members of his administration to sign a formal loyalty pledge. I think I will be able to, for the most part, determine who's loyal, he says. Anyone who gets crosswise with him, he says, will be gone in short order. That includes firing not only his own cabinet secretaries and political appointees, but also civil servants who work in the executive branch. If they're not following my policies, he says, absolutely. Trump's aggressive use of presidential powers will test the judiciary, the last line of defense against actions that threaten constitutional norms. They keep going back to these constitutional norms. These are just administrative norms. The Constitution does not protect any of this fucking bullshit. His critics worry that even if the high court strikes the president's actions, his Justice Department may not enforce the rulings. Trump and his aides are getting ready for an onslaught of lawsuits from groups challenging everything from his immigration measures and attacks on the federal bureaucracy to his attempt to withhold congressionally appropriated funds. We're constrained by realities of government and process in certain ways, says a Trump official, but he's going to do big shit. With unified control of Washington, there will be more pressure on Trump to deliver on his campaign promises to lower the cost of living, revive the manufacturing section, reverse America's trade deficit with China, and make peace abroad. Donald Kettle, an expert on government administration and former dean of the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland, argues that Americans are not prepared for the level of disruption that Trump's second stint in the White House is poised to bring, from potential changes to the education system to revisiting routine childhood vaccines, which Kennedy falsely linked to autism despite scientific evidence to the contrary. They say this too. This is another one of those things that they say. Show me the evidence. Show me the evidence. There isn't any. But please show me the evidence. And they also say this like, oh, the people that voted for Trump, they're not ready for what Trump is going to do for Trump to do all that. Yes, we are. This is what we voted for. This is what we fucking want. Bring the hammer. Let's do this. The scale of change that we're going to see is unprecedented, and the implications for government are enormous, he says. Voters believe the government is wasteful and untrustworthy, Kettle adds. But if Trump follows through on his pledge to slash a wide range of programs, you could end up with blowback very quickly that affects the lives of lots and lots and lots of ordinary Americans. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I love this picture too. All of the pictures for this article. Like if you have a moment to just go pull up the article and look at it. Like the pictures of Trump in this are great. By the end of Trump's first term, voters were exhausted by the chaos, fed up with his antics, and frustrated by his management of an unprecedented global health crisis. He left office with low approval ratings. Interestingly enough, Joe Biden's approval ratings are going to be about 30 points lower than what Trump's were when Trump left, but that's neither here nor there. Trump's victory in November may be partly the product of short memories. For his part, Trump puts faith in his negotiating abilities. We can use the same words, he says, but maybe it's a look in your eye that works. Yet already the president-elect is moving the goalposts on some of his pledges, like lowering the price of groceries. It's hard to bring things down once they're up, Trump says. You know, it's very hard. If his approach doesn't work and Trump feels boxed in, critics worry he will become ever more extreme. To his closest aides, the president-elect's unpredictable style will give him an edge over America's competitors. People are genuinely afraid that if they don't listen to him, bad things can happen, and there are consequences for disregarding him, Vance says. Faced with the challenges of governing, Trump seems almost wistful that his last campaign is behind him. It's sad in a way, he says, of his election win, as the shadows begin to fall on the manicured lawns around his mansion. It will never happen again. But a lot can happen in 4 years under President Donald J. Trump. Like I said, I thought it was a well-written article. I thought it covered what happened in the lead up to the election of 2024 pretty well. I thought it kind of lays out where we may very well be going. Again, it has a lot of the leftist tropes that, like I said, you kind of have to take with a grain of salt. But all in all, I mean, you can tell me if you agree with me or not, but I thought it was a well-done article, especially for Time. I mean, this is the same Time magazine that 4 years ago wrote the whole thing on, the fortifying of the election. So, you tell me what you thought about it, but I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was a pretty good take, a pretty good coverage of Trump for the man of the year, person of the year, whatever the fuck they want to call it. Anyway, that'll do it for me today. I will be back next week with another one, and be sure to tune in every day, every morning. I try to do it around like 9:30-ish a.m. Central every morning. Sometimes I'm a little earlier, sometimes a little later, depending on work and other stuff that I've got going on, taking kids to school, whatnot. But every morning I do a daily, so tune in for those and see what's going on in the day-to-day news. That'll do it for me. I will see you next week or possibly tomorrow if you tune in for the dailies. Later.
Before you go, make sure you check out our great sponsor, Agorist Acres. Now, AgoristAcres.com, you can find over 100 varieties of seeds. They've got vegetables, flowers, all kinds of stuff. They've got heritage brands, everything that you want to start any kind of garden that you need. It's free shipping on any order of $20 or more. They've got cool packaging, and most of the seeds come in a fancy glass vial, no paper envelopes. They accept US dollars and crypto and can easily take either at checkout. Now be sure to head over to agoristacres.com, and anything that you get, use the promo code FCT at checkout for 10% off your order. I say all the time that you need to be starting your own garden, you need to be growing your own food, you need to be getting off the grid and becoming less dependent on grocery stores and stuff like that. Agorist Acres is a great first start. They have got everything you need for whatever kind of garden you want. Great people, great product, highly recommend. So go check them out.